Hello, it is Auesis here. You may have seen my guide on Reddit. I will post a link to it, but this is essentially just a supplementary thing. I suppose you could view it on its own, because I'm still going to go over the build and what it is, essentially, but I advise you go and look at the text version as well, just to be sure, because I probably won't be able to get everything into the video format. Everything that you need to know is pretty much written down, so well, we'll give it a shot anyway. So I'll just first quickly go over what the build actually is, describing why I've chosen certain elements, yada yada yada, and then I'll start showing you various examples of dungeon environments, because this build changes quite often, on the fly, switching around various traits and weapons, etc. So I just want to show you sort of when that comes about, what that means, reasons behind them, and just to show you the flexibility that this build offers, as opposed to some builds. I used to run a specific sword pistol build, which was just all about the DPS and the signets and all that stuff, and that seemed very rigid, and I didn't like the style. I'm not a big fan of sword pistol, to be honest. So I decided to try and branch out and use every single thing that is available in the Thief's Arsenal, with the exception of pistol dagger, because that's a condition set, and screw condition sets in PvE at least. So just remember, this is a dungeon build only. I advise you wouldn't use something like this in World vs. World or SPVP. I have a very Shadow Hearts heavy build for World vs. World and that stuff, so remember this is a PvE only setup. And in the written version, you will have seen that I describe it as an aggressive build. What I mean by that is I am aggressive, not the build is aggressive. Because if you look here, like this trait line here, this is mostly just a defensive trait line, except for quick recovery. Perhaps you could argue that, but you know, most of this stuff has defensive elements within it. That's to supplement my aggressive playstyle. I'm trying to get to the front line as much as possible, and I'm always in danger of getting hit by something from somewhere. So that's what I mean by aggressive. I don't mean statistically, or you know, it's not all aggressive here, it's all aggressive here in my character, running around and doing various things. That's the aggression part of it. The build is just supplementing that with defensive elements to support that. I went for a balance between high damage, high mobility, and team support. And the team support comes through deception and some small various boon buffs. So that's mostly rezzing, projectile deflections, etc. So let's get straight to it. This trait line is pretty much the obvious straight line that everyone goes for with a thief damage build. Everyone usually gets the extra vitality and either execution or hidden killer for some reason. But this one has been up for debate for a while. From my perspective, I used to use critical haste for the, well, because it was good DPS back in the day, but since it got nerfed and this didn't get compensated, I decided to just scrap this completely, and I will either go with Side Strike for the just this universal bonus of critical chance, but sometimes I'll go for Furious Retaliation, and that change is situational depending on whether you're against a lot of mobs with weaker health or fewer mobs with larger pools of health, because sometimes just having stronger mobs in smaller concentrations, you would be better off just getting that constant bonus, because let's be honest, you'll always be trying to flank your opponent as a thief. So that's completely up to you when you want to switch that. Personal preference really, to be honest. But remember that since you are stealing to get Fury and you have 20% boon duration, you will benefit from a decent amount of Fury if you don't have warriors with you. That's the crucial part. If you have a bunch of warriors with you, they will almost always be using for Great Justice or something, and Ellies perhaps, if they were with you and they're sharing auras, you'll get Fury from that too. So sometimes it's just not worth getting that extra bonus of Fury, because you'll be given Fury regardless. Again, that just depends on what dungeon you're in and what group setup you have, so that just depends on the situation. But this line, Shadow Hearts, is the one that always changes. I simply could not stand getting rid of Shadow Hearts completely, because some of these traits are just so incredibly useful, and the great thing is most of the ones that are useful to me are in the very first slot, so I decided, well, I can just swap whichever one I like. So let's see, I mean, this one is pretty much the one I use mostly for the reduction in all 3 of these utilities, and these are the ones that I always use in dungeons, pretty much. There is very little circumstance that makes me switch these out. The only one that really changes is Smokescreen for Signal of Agility for extra endurance against solitary bosses if I want to stay up front for more, and they don't really have much projectiles. So, you know, apart from that, this is pretty much all I ever run with. And Deception, cooldown reduction, well, it's a universal benefit, you know, I'm going to be using them at some point, so it always helps. But depending on what weapon I'm using, I may use any of these 3 here. This line never changes, essentially. I love the Vigor for withdrawal. Is it Vigor or Vigor? I don't actually know. But the extra dodges you get, including a dodge on your heal skill, I actually adore this skill. I way prefer it to Hide in Shadows, with the exception of some various dungeons which have lots of damaging conditions, lots of poison / bleeding / burning. I will switch up for Hide in Shadows occasionally, but mostly I'll be sticking with Withdraw and getting rid of conditions either via Shadow Step or with Sword Main Hand or something. The only time this ever changes is for Fleet Shadow, and I use that in the Dredge Fractal, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. So that's pretty much that. There's nothing much to discuss. And Trickery, this never changes either. There is nothing else that's worth taking at this point. But I decided to go with Trickery for this bonus, for Thrill of the Crime, simply because I enjoy being, well, not being, but almost feeling useful. I like buffing myself with the Fury for the extra crit rate, because I'm not fully Berserker at this point, so it's always nice to have extra crit on me if there are no warriors around, etc. But yeah, I mean, that's great. I just love having that. And also, the stealing to give extra initiative is good in a panic situation. If you need an evade skill at the last second or something, it's always nice to just have that little bit of a panic button right there. So that's pretty much everything lined up there. Utilities, I mean, I've pretty much already outlined them. I mean, these are all situational. You can use pretty much whatever you want. Sometimes I'll use Infiltrator Signet, especially underwater, because there's nothing else useful underwater. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all that stuff. But I also mention in the written guide that any weapon is usable, with the exception of Pistol Dagger, and yeah, that's extremely true. I love using Dagger Pistol, just for the blind field, and the stealths on access, especially if you trait for this, to get initiative back when you stealth. So it's always sustainable. I mean, Quick Recovery and Infusion of Shadow, they are pretty much the bread and butter of a World vs. World Dagger Pistol build. So, you know, you pretty much have all of the cogs that you need for that to operate. Occasionally, I will use Pistol against bosses like Captain Asham in the Ascalon Fractal and the Dredge Suit in the Dredge Fractal, which are preferable at range, simply because they do silly things at melee range. Captain Asham possesses a very great sword, and teammates don't really like that, so I'd rather not get in trouble with them. And the Dredge Suit, if you melee him, he stops to attack you, and that's not what you want. You want to kite him around the room, so it's just common sense not to melee him. And then Shortbow, I only ever use that in the Dredge Fractal against all of the Dredge. When the mobs come towards you, I usually use this combo, this area weakness combo, to reduce the damage to my team on a global scale. Far more useful as a skill application than just running in and meleeing everything. I mean, I know I'm aggressive, but I'm not completely stupid, you know. You know, if I can be more useful than just running around smacking things, then I will be. So that's why I use Shortbow pretty much exclusively in the Dredge Fractals. Apart from that, I will use Dagger Pistol. Sword Pistol is extremely useful in the Ascalon Fractal because of the warriors that love to pounce you, and you get good AoE damage against them as well. Especially the Pistol Whip, occasional stuns, and headshot against mages, etc. You know, Sword Pistol is generally just one of the more preferable weapon sets, but I don't like using it that much, as I previously mentioned. I just feel too rooted, and I almost have a small case of ADHD. I just need to be running around and dodging attacks out of my own initiative and all that sort of stuff. So, Sword Pistol is fantastic, it's great, use it often, but I don't like to. I like to be more agile and ninja-y. And that's why I usually run Dagger Pistol or Dagger. I love using Dancing Dagger, actually. It seems to be quite overlooked. I love the crippling aspect. It just tears down mobs like Ice Brood Wolves in Crucible of Eternity at the start, because they pretty much rely on pouncing on you. And if you cripple that ability, they're pretty much useless. And also some bosses that love to run around, Jinva the Butcher being one example, Legendary Archdiviner in the Cliffside Fractal. I melee all those bosses all the time, and being able to just slow them down consistently is a great bonus for me and for the team as well, because usually my teammates don't like to melee him, while I'm pretty much the only one up in his face. So it's just nice to keep him away from my teammates at the same time as me pounding on him. So that's great, and Cloak and Dagger, naturally all the bonuses that come with that, including the stealths and the condition removals and the blinds, you know, depending on whatever you're doing in any given situation, that changes all the time. I can't think of any other weapon set at this point. You know, that's pretty much it. You just change your traits naturally as the situation arises, and it's just common sense from there, I guess. I think this is pretty much one of the most flexible builds out there for a thief in a dungeon environment, so I really seriously advise that you try it, just experiment with it, and let me know what you think, because I'm in love with it at the moment. But now I'm going to show you various clips of dungeons and examples of how I change around the build for the situation, to give you an idea of how it operates, because it operates by changing around so often. That's the great boon of it, it's the flexibility. So, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, I'll see you guys in the specific dungeon example videos. Ta-ta! Hi again, I just forgot to mention one thing, and that was the gear that I was wearing. So, let's just quickly go through that. All of the main armor stuff here is all power, toughness, and vitality, with ruby orbs attached. And then, apart from those, absolutely everything else is Berserker. Since I spent my laurels on Transivon Snuffles, I do not have the Ascendant Amulet, but that is going to come up whenever I get the Cat Tonic after that, because I don't really care that much, to be honest with you. Ascended Backpiece, an Ascended Accessory, Ascended Rings, you know, everything, just the maximum amount of Berserker that you can get out of these slots, just equip those. Weapons, Berserker, naturally. I've got a Precision Sigil, the one that stacks per kill. Always nice, because I need more crits. I'm not interested in more power, I have plenty of power. It's not that much of a problem. So you suppose you're going to be asking why I have soldier stats on the main part of my armor, and that's simply because the nature of my playstyle means I need some statistical defense, but not so much that it becomes pointless. You know, because most of my survival is going to be through dodging, but at some point I'm going to screw up, at some point I'm going to make a mistake, dodge at a wrong moment or something, and it's just nice to have a little bit of defense to soak that up and just to ensure that I survive, and then I can just quickly recover and continue as normal. Because, you know, not everyone is flawless, people make mistakes, I make mistakes, and, you know, I just want to make sure that I have some backup in the form of defense statistics. But, you know, if you want to run all Berserker, then that's fine. You know, if you're confident enough to run complete Berserker and then just tear stuff up face to face with no defensive application whatsoever in your gear, that's absolutely fine. You can do that if you want. But for me, I think this is pretty much the perfect balance. I mean, my damage is formidable as hell, especially when I've buffed it with food and stuff. I'll come to that in a second. And I don't feel completely and utterly glassy either. So, you know, I've found my balance, but you can balance it up as much as you want. Just remember that the more Berserker, the better, essentially. If you are capable of mitigating all of the incoming damage via dodges, which is what this build is based around, evasion and not soaking up damage. So just bear that stuff in mind. And now to the food quickly. I will use bowls of curry potato squash soup for the extra crit and precision, as the maintenance oil for the extra precision as well, because my precision is not the greatest, especially when I've slotted soldier. But if you go all Berserker, then you can put whatever the hell you want in here. You could use the power version of this buff, or whatever, but I especially love this one. So those are the two that I use. If you're following my build directly, then those are the two ones that you'll buy and use. They're quite expensive to buy in bulk, so be careful with that. But apart from that, yeah, that's that. That's the gear and the food and the weapons and the stats and all that stuff. So that's everything covered. And now I will show you the dungeon examples and stuff. So yeah, I'll see you then.